Hi, Joel. This is Christina from The Upcoming. It's so lovely to speak with you again. To start, would you like to tell us what Mad Bills to Pay is about?
Yeah, sure. Mad Bills to Pay is about two teenagers navigating life in the Bronx. One of them sells nutcracker cocktails. Well, eventually, both of them sell cocktails on this beach in the Bronx called Orchard Beach. And yeah, it's an interesting story.
And what sparked the idea for this film?
It was sparked by just my youth, like growing up in the Bronx, and a lot of the young men I grew up around. They were sort of very similar to my protagonist, and basically, I was thinking about them when I was writing the film.
Speaking of your protagonists, the characters, especially Rico and Destiny, are young and in fairly vulnerable situations. But how did you avoid reducing them to simply victims in your narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just really exploring the humanity in the situation, and they're both very complex characters. Rico's a very complex character, very contradictory. On the one hand, he wants to step up and be kind of like the man of his household, and to I guess be the protector in kind of the situation, but he's also very much a child, and so he's dropping a lot of the balls, and I think that's very human. So I approached both of these characters in a very from a very like humanistic place. I just wanted to show them with other nuance and things. Like they're not victims; they're just in a difficult situation, and that's just their story. Not every young couple, teen parents. Because the film is about two teen parents. They're responsible teen parents as well. Just in this particular case, you have a protagonist who's not the most responsible person, and that's kind of the story of the film. But yeah, they're not victims. I hope not.
What were some like teen pregnancy and teen parenthood tropes that are often found in movies that you hope to avoid?
I guess this kind of whole idea of I didn't really grow up so close with my father, and he was quite absent. My mom was a teen mom, and I think there's a sort of stereotype of like absent fathers in like Black and Brown and Latino communities and things. And with this film, although Rico on the surface feels like he will be like a deadbeat dad, I never wanted him to come across as like someone who would abandon like the mother of his child and his child. I think he's a complicated character, but he is well intended, and in the way that the film ends, which I won't give away, but it's very open ended in that we don't say that Rico is gonna leave Destiny, or that the relationship isn't going to work. It's really up to the audience to decide what will happen, what their fate will be. But it was always, yeah, like that was the one that I was really trying to avoid. It's just like teen pregnancies are complicated, but they don't always need to result in a sort of single parent kind of situation, in other words.
And can you tell us a bit about your casting process?
Sure. Yeah, the casting process was like pretty involved. We shot it, or so we scouted our casts mainly from like beaches and parks in New York City. So it was like a lot of street casting with a lot of flyers, and just like randomly approaching people like, "Hey, do you want to be in a movie?" Which was you know interesting because you have two strange people approaching you, asking you if you want to be in a movie. It sounds weird, but thankfully people in New York can be quite open-minded, so they would come to the auditions, and in the end we ended up with like a 50, almost like 50-50 professional and non-professional cast. The only true non-professional though is Destiny, who plays Destiny in the film. It's her name, but she's someone who we found on TikTok, and we just loved her reels, and we wanted to invite her to the. But everyone else has some sort of like acting experience, whether that's in theater or screen, acting. But
And the acting is very, very naturalistic. How scripted would you say that it was? And was there any improv involved?
the acting was very naturalistic. It was very improvised. It was semi-scripted, so we maybe scripted about like 30 to 40% of it, and that was mainly for, you could say, like financing reasons, because we needed to just get our money to go out and make the film. And then outside of that, like we just had a story outline that was very like a lot of people think that we made this film like in a very documentary way, and that we edited it in a very documentary, but it wasn't true. Like we made the film in 16 days with, you know, we had like a schedule of like 100 scenes, so we had to know precisely like what we were shooting, and we went into the production knowing what our story structure was. So every scene that you see in the film was pre-visualized, pre-planned.
And can you tell us a bit about your budget?
Yeah, the budget. I can't really speak on it so much because it's semi-confidential, but it was a very humble budget. You know, it wasn't a very big budget, and it became bigger only when we began discussing kind of music rights and things like this, because we had some music in the film that it was incidental. You know, we were shooting in the Bronx. You're always going to catch music from, you know, a car passing by, or, you know, a party next door, and, you know, that music needs to be cleared. So, and that turns out it costs a lot of money. So but the film, the actual production cost was quite low. We called in a lot of favors.
What were the challenges and rewards of working with a more modest budget?
The challenges were that you almost have to be more industrial and like industrious, because you have to stretch those resources as far as they can go. So that means that your planning has to be really bulletproof. And on a film like this that is very improvised and so on, you want this sort of naturalistic feel, this almost like hybrid documentary feel. Like balancing those two things can be really difficult, but we made it work. And I was well aware of the limitations of our resources, but I was also pushing on like, oh no, we need to go for another take because we didn't get it in the previous take. So we just need, yeah, I was pushing in that, like, it's like the balance between resources and quality. You're always trying to fight that battle. And I think in the end, we got the quality that we needed to make a nice film.
Your film is set in July in New York, so it's obviously a very hot time of the year. How did you manage to capture and kind of show the heat of the summer through film?
Yeah, I think that was sort of very organic because it was very hot, and especially in the apartment when we were shooting, like for the sound reasons, the sound recording, we couldn't have like air conditioners on or fan. We had fans on from time to time, but it was just naturally hot. So like everyone was sweaty, and it was August. It was like the hottest month of the summer. So like everyone was just yeah, just drenched in sweat all the time, and that heat somehow transferred itself onto the image, and it's a summer film. You can see it. like,
And how did you decide on the title card, which says the working man is a sucker? And what does that mean to you?
yeah, okay, so that's one that's been changing because we're a bit insane. So like from festival to festival, like we've been making slight changes to the film. These are like these are great opportunities to like I guess audience test the film, and see what works and see what doesn't work. But the quote is one that we've changed recently to. It's a quote from the RZA from a book called The Tao of Wu. The RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, and there's so now that sort of working man as a sucker has been replaced with something else. But we're still, I think the working man as a sucker actually plays better with an international audience. So we're considering maybe going back to that one. But the idea behind it for me with that specific quote was there's a film called The Bronx Tale that was made in like the early 90s. It was directed by Robert De Niro. It was like it was like directorial debut. I think it was the only film he ever directed. But this film is like such a legendary film in the Bronx. And one of the characters, the protagonist of that film, his name is Calogero. He always quotes this: "The working man is a sucker," which is advice that was given to him by this guy that he looked up to in the neighborhood. So like, if you're from the Bronx and you know this film, you'll know exactly where that comes from. But also like, I think there's a more maybe deeper meaning to it as well, because I think when you grow up in a neighborhood where you're alienated and kind of what's the word I'm looking for, like where you're almost like disaffected, this is almost like an attitude that you adopt, because it's just like, why, this sort of culture of education and so on, and like it just, this is not meant for me. And so like I don't know. I think a lot of the young men I grew up around like really lived life on the edge, and this was like an attitude that they adopted. It's just like, I'm gonna find the quickest path to like to a good life and to earning money, and oftentimes that meant like hustling or like, some like sold drugs or weed or whatever it is, in the case of Rico, he sells these nutcracker cocktails. Like he has his hustle. Like he thinks he's like gonna figure it out. He doesn't need to go down the traditional path because he feels like it's not for him and he's not wanted by it in a way.
And your film was screened at the MoMA earlier this year. Congratulations. What was that like?
Yeah, that was a good screening. That was like the homecoming almost of the film because the film was made in New York. So like it was my family there, the families of the cast, like when people ask me about it, like I'm like it kind of felt like a wedding because like it's just you have all these people from different aspects of your life, from your childhood, from like, your school days, like coming to watch your film. And it's like I hadn't seen some people in like 15, 20 years. And I was like, oh, wow, it's so cool, but it was super special for the cast and like the New York crew, which about half of the crew is from New York. The other half is from the UK. But they were very excited about it. Their families came out, and then the parties were really great. It was good. And then yeah, MoMA film at Lincoln Center. They were just great hosts and super accommodating and just lovely, lovely, a lovely, lovely like yeah, lovely festival, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's possible to in this like because I think when we premiered it at Sundance, it was really beautiful it was the first time the cast were together since the making of the film, and at the first Q&A, like, the floor was theirs and they were just speaking on like, and it was so great to see them see themselves in the film for the first time and like what they had to say. It was like, for instance, like Destiny was like, she was so happy to see, for example, like a plus size woman in kind of a leading role. And she was like, that was so meaningful to her. And for Joanna to see like Black Latinos and Black Dominicans represented, that was so important to her. So I want to say it's mostly positive. I'm sure some people might take issue with the representation, but it's I this was true to the sort of my observations and kind of experiences of where I grew up. So, but yeah.
And do you think your film has taken on new meaning as it's released, like now in this political climate?
With sort of what's going on with immigration, yeah, I think the film has. I mean, I made the film even when things maybe in the U.S. were a little rosier with Biden, kind of, the Biden administration, where we weren't having all these sort of immigration kind of issues, and deportations kind of going on. The film was made even then, like as a document to somewhat like preserve this community because mostly because New York City is gentrifying quite rapidly, and I fear that in a decade's time, like this community as it exists right now might not exist in the same way. So it was meant to be a document to give insight into sort of the lives of ordinary people, Dominicans, that you might come across in New York who you might not otherwise not know. And I think that's still relevant today, because it's just like, especially with these sort of very simplistic narratives that we have around like immigration and immigrants, like, that are very one dimensional. I think it's important to see that, and again, I'm not trying to idealize, like, because I don't think any person or any family is ideal. You have people with issues, with contradiction, with, like, dealing with all sorts of things. And I want to show all of that as well. But I think it's important to show immigrants, people of color, as three-dimensional people with flaws and with, like redeeming qualities and so on, like they're not what, the Trump administration wants, the sort of the mainstream to believe, that they're sort of, like, here to take jobs and whatever it is, that's super simplistic. Like people are here genuinely looking, most people like here to pursue an honest living. And by here, I mean, obviously we're in Czech Republic now, but I mean here in the U.S., people are here to, contribute and seek an honest living and, just live in peace, so it's.
And lastly, what's next for you?
At the moment, I'm developing a couple of ideas. I live in London at the moment, so one is about the Dominican kind of diasporic, like Latino community there that's very emerging. It's nowhere near as big as the one in the U.S. And then there's another idea sort of about the gentrification of New York that's kind of in development as well, and some other things that I'm still trying to figure out, honestly. Like I'm just here with this film at the moment, trying to give that all my energy. But yeah.
Thank you.